There's a lot of different ways to present a view in SwiftUI, and in this tutorial I want to show you examples for sheets. I made a little demo app which uses the fake store API. So I'm fetching these items from the server. You can go to the detail and see more information about them. So it's a little shopping app. And one example for a sheet is, in this case, I want to filter my list for categories. I added here a little button, and this brings up a sheet with 4 categories. I can also search for the categories. When I select this and I leave, when I leave the sheets, I need to perform this another action, which is in this case fetch more. I actually refetch this because usually in my case I don't have a lot of data. I always have all the data, but usually you would need to get the proper data. Sheets are shown modally on top of your main content, and you can swipe to dismiss. The newer SwiftUI, I think with 15 and 16, we got a lot of customizations. For example, you can now, there's one view modifier where you can say that the sheet, you can't automatically dismiss this, so the swipe on delete doesn't work. We can also add a full screen cover. For example, now here, and when the user presses on buy now and is not logged in, and this is just a demo, so I always show the authentication view. When the user wants to buy this, they have to create an account, or they have to log in. And I show this in a full screen cover. This means I can't here swipe to. The only way I can leave this view is if I, as a developer, add a button or an action to dismiss. And this is the case when I properly sign in. I would implement this in the future. In the demo project, it doesn't do this. But when I press here not now, then I dismiss this sheet or this full screen cover. So we can have a look at how to programmatically dismiss sheets and full screen covers. In my case, I don't have here a lot of content, and I don't really want to show the whole sheet. I want to make a smaller sheet. I added here another tab. This is because I moved this in another tab because my fetching works differently. Because here, now I have the possibility to resize the sheets. This is with presentation detents. As you see, this makes a lot more sense for my case because I only have 4 categories. But if I continue building on this, and then at some point I'm having more and more categories. These categories come from the server, so I'm fetching them. Right now it's just fake data, but in the future there would be 20 categories, quite a lot of them. And I definitely want to have the possibility to have this large area. You can allow the user to make this smaller or larger. And you see here when I go to the very small one, the background is actually not dimmed anymore. This is because I set the background to be interactable. Usually you can't tap on the background, but now if I tap here, you can actually do something like go to the detail. These kind of interactions are quite cool. You can also remove here this indicator if you don't like this. Additional styling, need to go to the other example, is for example here in the settings view, I changed the whole background color. This also works nicely with the material, so you can make this transparent. And I changed here the corner radius. These are available for iOS 16.4, which is a kind of weird that it's in the middle. Together with all of these additions, Sheet became quite powerful, and I hope I can show you a little bit with this demo project where you actually would use this, because we have the other presentation modifiers you have is, for example, a popover. On iOS, this will not be shown as a popover. It also uses Sheet. So a lot of the stuff I show you with the presentation detents work also with a popover sheets. We also have now the inspector for iOS 17. This is more for macOS, where you have a sidebar, a detail view on the trailing edge with additional information. On iOS, again, here on the iPhone, it would be shown as a sheet. So Sheet is everywhere, so it's worth really looking into it. Okay, let's start by having a look at the demo project that I prepared. In my content view, I just have this first tab and second tab. They're pretty much the same. I had to have 2 different ones because of this sheet presentation, so I can do the fetch at different points. The networking layer is really nothing special. I made this very basic. So I have here this product type with the title information and the ratings and the descriptions, for example. Then I created here a load function. This is in my service layer. I probably overdid it a little bit. So I'm just fetching here the products from the products endpoint. This is loading all products. If I have a selected category, I load products for this category, so with category endpoint. Let's go to the first tab view. I have here this product list view where I show all the products. And when this view appears, I'm loading, so I'm fetching all of the products. I used a navigation stack. And you see here the navigation destination with product type, where I show the product detail view. The product list is just for each, where I show with links each of these products. And the product detail is here this simple view. Now let's implement our first sheet. And I want to show my category selector when I press here on this tab or item. This is in my product category list view. So I need to have another view model to fetch the categories. I said I'm getting this from the server, and at some point it's going to be more than just 4. In a real project it will be more. Okay, I'm going to show now this view in a sheet. When you use sheet, all of them work with presentation state properties. So after my navigation stack, I'm adding here a sheet. You have 2 different types, the one with item. This is if you have, for example, if you want to show the sheet for each of these elements in my product list. So instead of a detail, I would want to, in the navigation stack, the detail, I can also use a sheet for this, and then you would connect it to the item. In my case, I only have a, do I show this sheet or not? So it's a Boolean value is enough. We use this modifier, which means I need to have a state property, private var show category selector, and in the beginning I say false, so don't show this. Now I can connect this to my sheet, and in the content I want to use the view that I already prepared, which is the product category list view. And in this view I'm actually selecting a category that I need to pass further to my view model for fetching the proper data. This is here in my fetcher, my product fetcher. So this is $fetcher selected category. Okay, now when I press on this button here, still nothing happens because I did not actually toggle the state property. So let's do this, show category selector toggle. Okay, when I press here now, it opens this sheet and I can drag it to dismiss this. I added here this button also as an additional information for the user that they can dismiss this view, but it doesn't do anything. So let's go and check how we can add this functionality. Most of these presentation styles like sheet and popovers and so, you can use the environment value for dismiss. So I'm going to ask the environment for the dismiss property. This used to be the presentation mode, but dismiss is easier. This is an action call, and if I call and execute dismiss, it actually dismisses this view. So in my dismiss button here in the action, I say dismiss. Okay, so I call dismiss, and we should now dismiss the sheet. Go back to my first tab view where I implemented the sheet. So I open and I press here, and we are dismissing this view. Now, there's still one important thing missing. When I select something here and I leave, my view doesn't update. I need to actually call fetch here. Basically, in this example, when I dismiss this sheet, I want to execute the fetching for this category. And for this, sheet has another initializer where you get the dismiss action. So here, this is this dismiss. This is a closure, so it's called whenever this view is dismissed. So I basically just wanted to have the same. The rest is the same. I shouldn't use the one with item. Okay, try again. So I have now here an additional dismiss call. You can test this by adding here print. In order to test this in the preview and see my print statement, you have to use the debugger here and go for the preview one. Just going to clear this. So now when I open this, it is actually a printing here, fetching the categories. This is what I do when this view appears. Then I select something and I press here dismiss. And the on dismiss action is executed with my print statement here. So now we need to update our fetch, and for this I already added some code to the view model, to the product fetch. So this is fetch. This is the load function. So in this case I already set the selected category here. So this one is the correct one. And then it loads this products for the selected category. Not going to keep my print statement. Okay, let's try. I select jewelry. Now I don't do anything. Only when I dismiss, it updates this. This is a good use case for actually dismiss action, because I really only want to fetch this when I dismiss this view for this sheet. Because as you see, I don't see the background. It would be a waste of effort here to fetch this data. This is different in the other case, in the second tab. Here, for this one, I want to use now these half sheets. And if you see parts of it, then I want to always update. So we are going to implement this a little bit differently. First, I'm going to repeat the same steps. I need to add here my sheet, adding the state property and then the sheet modifier. And I'm not using the dismiss in this case. Again, I need to toggle my show category property. Now that I have this, the main part of this exercise is to actually only show a half sheet. So I'm using the presentation detent, and this is a set or a collection, meaning you can set multiple ones. Maybe you want to allow, as you saw me earlier, only the very small one, the medium and the large one. So you can set all the options that you want. And I'm using here medium. Now when I open this, it shows it only medium. Medium is like half the size of the screen. Then let's explore the other options. So we have medium, large. Large is the one you always saw. This is the big one. Now that I have more than one option, you also see here this indicator. Then we have fraction. For example, you can say 0.25, which is 20% of my screen height. So this is 25%. Or if you prefer, you can also use here height. Maybe we want to also add 700. Or maybe I should use it the other way around. Because I guess for the minimum, it's probably better to say in pixel, because then I know exactly how large this is, even on the smaller screen. So let's use something small for these, and the fraction of 75%. Okay, so now this will be always 200 pixel. Then we have medium, my fraction of 75% and the large one. So this is the default one that you always have. You also have the possibility here to add a selection. For example, if you want to start off with a different one, let's say we want to always start with the medium one. So this is again a add state private var current detent. This is a presentation detent of large. And now I can pass this. When I open the sheet now, it always shows the largest first. And then I can, from there on, move to the other ones. For the very small one, I want to allow the interaction with my background. And for this, we use the presentation background interaction. We can also use the other one in a minute. So this is disabled, enabled, or up through. So when I enable this, now you can always interact with the background. But maybe in our case, I only want to do this when I'm in the very small one, or until in the smaller ones. That's why they have here this up through. So I said we have a height, minimum height of 200. Maybe we try 200. So a height of 200. Again, you have to pass here this presentation detents. So this is disabled, and then the small one is enabled. And I can here interact with the background. The last one, because there are quite a few, this compact adaptation stuff, this is for the popover, the drag interactor presentation drag indicator. This is the one where you can actually hide the indicator. So now you don't see this little indicator on top here, this little bar anymore. I like this, so let's keep this in. And then I wanted to just show you the presentation content interaction. So we have resizes. This is when you make a swipe gesture, what should happen? And we're going for scrolling. I probably should have showed you the other one. Currently don't have here that much. So you see here I do scroll, because I have here a scroll view. We have two competing gestures. The scrolling inside the scroll view. and the scrolling or the dragging of my sheet. So now when I here interact on my scroll view, it scrolls instead of the sheet. Probably need to show you the difference, resize. See, now when I here try to scroll in my scroll view, it doesn't, it resizes this sheet. Okay, let's go back to the previous one, scrolls. So here you see I can scroll in my scroll view. The scroll view reacts. Also here, when I'm in the lowest one. There's a little bit of an extra interaction if you have something scrollable in your sheets. I guess I'm going to stick with this one for now. One thing that I haven't mentioned in this example is every time I here select something, my list is actually updating in the background. This is because this view, my second tab view, uses a different view model that I connected differently. Here I have the state property, the property for selected category. And I used a little bit of combine. So in this case, I say whenever my selected category changes, I'm going to create here a data stream. So when this changes and I have a new category, then I load all the products for this category. And if I don't have anything, I load all. This is why every time I change here my selection, my list updates. If you don't want to do this too much, I already used here remove duplicates. You can also use a throttle or a debounce to limit the time frame. Combine in this case is quite useful because it helps you to minimize and optimize how much work you do in the background. But as you see, the data updating here works quite differently from the previous example. Here, I always want to update my product list because it shows through. Whereas in my first tab, because this is always in large screen, this doesn't really make sense to update it all the time. I only need to update this once I leave this view. Now that I showed you how to resize these sheets to make them actually smaller, I also want to show you how to make it bigger to fill out the whole screen. So let's have a look at full screen cover. And I am going to use this here in my detail view for this buy now button. So I go to the product detail view, and here I want to add this full screen cover. Similar to the sheet, I first have to create a state property. So before my body, I declare a state, private var show off, which is in the beginning not shown, so false. And now at the end of this view, I'm going to add a full screen cover. Again, you have two different possibilities, either with items or with a boolean. And you can also get a dismiss action full screen cover. In my case, I'm only going to use here is presented and the content. The binding is to show off. And for the actual view, I'm using here one that I already have, which is the authentication view. Last, I actually need to toggle my state property. This is for my buy button here. In a real app, I would need to actually check, probably I have this data somewhere stored, if the user is logged in, if I have an account, and then I can actually make this request. In my case, this is just a demo or an early stage of this app. I'm going to toggle the show off property directly. So now when I press here, you see this whole view comes up and it fills the whole screen. Now I can't dismiss this with a swipe gesture, and similar to before with the sheet, I need to use the dismiss property from the environment. So that, for example, here on this not now, I can call dismiss. This is the same thing. Alternatively, you could pass the show off property to the authentication view and then toggle that property. That would be possible if you don't want to dismiss. As a last example, I want to add here sheet for at this gear button. This would be like a settings view. So in my first tab view, I'm just going to add another state property, var show settings, false. And then after my first sheet, I add another one, is presented, and I toggle now show settings. Add here my settings view. In the earlier versions of SwiftUI, you couldn't have two sheets. But now I think since iOS 15, You can add as many as you want to, so this works. After I actually added here the action to my settings to toggle the show settings. Okay, so this sheet still works, and this sheet now works. If this doesn't work, then you have to use the sheet with item. So item, the type needs to be identifiable. I used a lot of enums, so you have different cases. In this case, maybe I would have an enum with one case for showing settings and one for showing the category selector. And then you would just toggle, instead of toggling true and false, you would set it to nil to hide it, or to one of these cases to show one of the sheets. Luckily, we don't need to do this anymore, so I can just simply add more sheets. For this settings view, let's explore some of the other customizations for sheets with the settings view. For example, maybe in this case, I don't want to allow this swipe to dismiss. It is interactive dismiss disabled. If I set this, it will not allow this swipe to dismiss. You can also programmatically change this. Maybe sometimes you want it or not. Then you use this second one where you pass the dismiss property. Let's just do this, and now if I'm here and I try, you still see the animation a little bit, but I won't do it. Luckily, I already added here done button, which dismisses this view. My settings view right now looks very boring, so let's add some fancy styling. And we start with the presentation background. For example, you can here use a shape style. This would be a thin material, one of the materials. And now the background shines through, so you see it's a little bit, there's ultra thin to ultra thick. So I'm just using here ultra thin, so you really see that it's a little bit transparent. You can also do some more fancy stuff like colors or gradients. So I'm using the presentation background. Additionally, you can use an alignment, but in this case I use a gradient which fills out the whole sheet. So let's go for a linear gradient with the colors start and end point. So here you can say I'm using two colors, so going from pink to purple. The start point, so pink would be then under the, let's say, top leading. And then the end point, so the last color here would be then bottom trailing. So we have pink and purple. So top leading is pink and purple down there. This is looking pretty colorful. Then, which we can maybe fix a little bit by changing the settings views text here to a foreground color of white. I guess for settings you would not usually use here this kind of color, but I wanted to at least show you one more fancy example. Then the last one to polish this that I'm using is the presentation corner radius. So I'm going to make this really big, of 50, so you see this. And here, these corners are now having a radius of 50. Compare this to the default, which looks more like 20 or something. So these corners are much smaller. Presentation background and corner radius are nice features to tweak the appearance of this sheet. Okay, that's a wrap for sheets. You saw me using sheets in different situations for my app, how to dismiss these sheets, when to perform actions when you dismiss the sheets or when you have the sheets open, how to change the size of the sheets with presentation detents, how to change the background color, the interactions, how to do the full screen cover, in case you want to really make sure the user does what you want them to do. Another presentation style that fits into this category is actually popover. And this is an example where I use the popover for leaving a review. So instead of writing here text in a review, you say, oh, maybe you can also simply add here an emoji. And typically popovers are small views that are added with additional information if you don't have a lot of content. I could have also used a popover in my case because I don't have a lot of categories so far. Per default, popovers are shown also as sheet on iOS, on the iPhone. You see it here properly as a popover. This is only available with the newer iOS 16. If you want to see how I implement this popover, Check out the next video in this series. Don't forget to like this video if it was helpful. Until next time, happy coding!